What's up YouTube community, Bernd here, welcome back to another video lesson. This week we check out how to work with very interesting and suspenseful chord voicings to spice up your metal riffs, so let's get started right away. When I started my jazz guitar studies at the Vienna Music Institute many years ago, I had to learn a lot of different chord voicings in my first weeks to catch up with more experienced players in this style. I personally came from a rock and metal background, as you can probably guess, and had a lot of experience as a touring or session musician, but never really had a good music theory background. As soon as I started diving into the theory behind more complex and unique chord voicings, like the ones I'd like to show you today, it really opened up my songwriting for some really great and creative possibilities. As always, I'd like to start with a practical example. For this one I took a very basic chord progression that you've heard millions of times probably already and did my best to spice it up with more interesting chord voicings. So let's check that one out together now. As always, the PDF tab sheets and guitar profiles for this section are online on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Bernd. Before we dissect this particular practical example in detail, I'd like to share some basic music theory information with you. First of all, we mostly work with basic intervals in metal riffs. For example, the perfect fifth, the power chord and backbone of many very iconic riffs, the perfect fourth, the minor third, resembling the sound of minor chords, or the major third, resembling the sound of major chords, minor sixth, and so on. Please let me know if you guys are not familiar with the basic intervals. We can go into that in a separate, more basic lesson in the future. So for a short demonstration, a basic metal riff switching between different intervals could sound something like that. So first you should study the sound and names of all those individual intervals before you can move on to building more complex chords like the ones we will discuss today. So to continue with the theory fundamentals we need to reharmonize sections like that, we need to study basic chords first. A major chord, or just a major triad, consists out of a root note, major third and perfect fifth, in our case A, C sharp and E. While a minor chord, or just a minor triad, consists out of a root note, minor third and perfect fifth, in our case A, C and E. So as you might already know, this is the very basic structure of major and minor chords, or arpeggios, and if we play these notes on different strings in different octaves, we get the basic major and minor voicings. C major, A minor, D major, G major, F major, E minor, and so on. I'm sure you're familiar with those voicings already. So that doesn't sound too interesting, and when we add distortion to that for metal riffs, we don't really get a very satisfying sound out of it. Not exactly the sound I had in mind for the riff in the beginning. So to get to the voicings that are used for the practical example, we have to add more notes to the chords. So for now we were just playing the root, major or minor third and perfect fifth. And we played those notes over all the strings in different octaves, so just 3 notes. The first thing we can do is add the sevenths to these chords, either the major seventh for major seventh chords or the minor seventh for minor seventh chords. These chords are often referred to as jazz chords already by a lot of players, since they immediately give that kind of sound to your cadence. Here's a very basic example of that. I'm playing the common jazz cadence 2-5-1. First I'm only using the basic major and minor chords, and then I'm switching to major seventh, minor seventh and dominant seventh chords, and you will immediately hear the difference. The major and minor seventh add a completely new sound and also tension to those chords because they're just a semitone or a whole tone apart from the root. So they actually might sound pretty terrible to you when I just play the intervals. This is a minor 7th interval, D and C for the D minor 7th chord. Here's the interval in the context of the full chord. Notice how you can't really hear all that dissonance now. Sounds very different than just... And here's the major 7th, for example, with the last chord that I played, the tonic chord, C major 7th in this case. So this kind of sound is much closer to what I'm aiming for with the practical example for this week, but still I'm not just playing 7th chords, I'm adding even more notes to the voicings. The first chord I was playing is actually one of my favorites already. This is a voicing you can use for E minor. This one is really cool and suspenseful without sounding too dissonant. If we break it down, the root is E, of course. We're not including the root note in the voicing because we don't need it. The bass or the rhythm guitars are usually playing it anyway. We are starting with the perfect 5th B. Then we are adding the 9th, and this is the secret ingredient right here. In our case, that is F sharp. This is pretty much my favorite chord extension, especially with minor chords. It's actually the same note as the second note of the natural minor scale, or just the major 2nd interval, F sharp. But since we are playing it 1 octave higher, above the root, right here, it's referred to as the 9th. And on top of that, we are playing the minor 3rd G. And that's what gives this voicing this amazing suspenseful sound. So once again, perfect 5th B, 9th F sharp and minor 3rd G on top. So the reason why we get this cool suspenseful sound right here is the 9th F sharp rubbing against the minor 3rd G here, since they're just a semitone apart. So here's F sharp G, and if we play them on different strings, we get this kind of sound. Once again, in the context of the full chord, it doesn't sound that dissonant anymore. And then I just played more voicings with this concept. The second one was... Here I was playing G again, the minor 3rd, B, the perfect 5th, and F sharp, the 9th on top. So just a different inversion of the same approach. So the first part of the riff was something like that. Then I was just playing an E minor 7th voicing, and the minor 3rd G on top was changing to the perfect 4th A to turn it into a sus4 voicing, where we are replacing the 3rd with the 4th. So once again, the full section for E minor. So with all those slides and cool voicings, it sounds much more interesting than the foundation we were given with the practical example. I think I played something like that. And then I just continued with this concept. Instead of just playing the G power chord, I was playing this cool voicing. Again, this one features the 7th. In this case, it's a major 7th because it's a G major chord. On top, I'm adding the very dissonant diminished 5th interval. Then I was moving up to A, and I included voicings like that, where I'm also playing the 9th, that is resolving into the minor 3rd. That's actually one of my favorite tricks here, introducing some tension with the chord extension, the 9th in this case, and then kind of resolving into a less dissonant interval like the minor 3rd right here. For the second half of the riff I decided to change it up a bit, but I still kept the same thought process. I was playing this cool voicing instead of just playing the E power chord. So once again featuring the 9th F sharp here, and then the minor 3rd G, the open G string here on top. So the 9th and the 3rd are rubbing against each other once again. Then I was playing the same voicing from the beginning, but I made it a little bit bigger by including the root note E on the 7th fret of the A string. If the stretching here is a bit too hard, you can still stick to the more basic version where we start with the perfect 5th right away. Then I used the same approach for the G major chord. I was playing this popular voicing where I'm just playing the power chord, the perfect 5th. Then I add the 9th here on top, but I'm also adding the major 3rd right here, which can be a bit of a challenge. But it definitely pays off. And at the end I couldn't resist, I also added a little shred lick. So here I'm just descending the E natural minor scale. The tricky part here is nailing the string transitions correctly, but this is a topic for another video. So as I said, the PDF tabs and guitar profiles are online on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Bernd, in case you want to dig deeper and learn the full sequence in detail. As a homework exercise, I want you to come up with a super basic metal riff like the one I played in the beginning. And then I want you to experiment with the voicings and theory approaches we learned today to make it more interesting. Patrons can also send me audio or video files or guitar profiles or sheet music, whatever they prefer, and I get back to them with constructive feedback as soon as I can to help them out with this kind of reharmonization and more. So in the end, please remember to subscribe to join this community and to stay updated for more free guitar lessons. Leave a like if you enjoyed this one, it really means a lot to me, and a comment in case I can answer any questions for you. Thanks a lot for tuning in today, and I will see you very soon. All the best and have fun practicing until then.